Howdy hey folks, and welcome to Tales of a Con Artist, where I talk about being an art vendor at comic and anime conventions. A fun fact, I actually had to go back to previous videos and see what my intro dialogue was for this series because it's been so long since I did one of these. I actually took a little bit of a convention hiatus in 2024. I did a few shows where I was invited as a guest, but otherwise just took it easy. But now I'm back at it, so let's discuss my first post-hiatus con, C2E2 2025. C2E2 is a pretty big comic convention up in Chicago, and it's one I've been trying to get into for years. It has nearly 100,000 attendees, and I generally do really well at Comic-Con style shows, but the last few years I applied, I kept getting rejected. This year, though, they finally let me in. I'm not sure if it was me actually having a graphic novel out now, my audience being larger because of my YouTube growth, or the fact that a bunch of people apparently requested me as a guest, or maybe I just got lucky. Either way, I was headed up to Chicago for the first time ever and selling at one of the biggest cons I've ever done. So, how'd it go? Well, let me spin y'all a yarn for a minute. But real quick before we dive in, let's do Hey Star, what you drawin'? The art in the background is a special print I did to celebrate my webcomic cast-off's 10th anniversary. I had a lot of fun cramming the comic's entire cast into one image, and if you're curious about the characters, you can read the entire comic for free on the website, links down in the description. Okay, shelling over, let's talk C2E2. So, I'll be blunt, gang, the lead up for this convention was a nightmare. I moved into a new house about a week and a half before the show and was trying desperately to unpack and set up my house while also prepping for an out-of-state con. That, combined with several moving troubles wherein the extremely unprofessional movers I got stuck with volunteered to install my washing machine, did it wrong and caused a leak, leading me to have to spend 3 days drying out my laundry room, and just as that problem cleared up, my water got shut off for 3 days because of a miscommunication with the utility company. Plus, I was trying to catch up on all the work that piled on during the several weeks I was packing and prepping for the move, all while dealing with internet issues and some of my important work devices suddenly deciding to give up the ghost. It was a lot, but isn't that just the way it goes? Suffice to say, I was very burnt out just going into this con. My creativity drive was running on fumes, and I was already mentally and physically exhausted going into what would be my largest convention ever. So I spent the few nights leading up to the con hoping and praying that spending some time amongst other creatives and talking to attendees would help recharge my batteries. In addition to that, though, I had a few things I did for this con that I knew would help make the selling process a little easier. 3 big changes for this convention. Number 1, I've been in the process of slimming down on my acrylic charms and discontinuing a lot of my less popular designs. That means less inventory to keep track of and less cluttered display overall. 2, I'm shifting my wares a bit to focus more on stickers. They're easier to transport, easier and cheaper to restock, and I installed a self-serve sticker display so people can just grab the exact stickers they want, saving me a lot of time during checkout. And 3, I brought in a professional. I asked my friend Erin to come to this con and be my helper for the weekend, and she has experience doing retail for nerd stores and was already familiar with pretty much everything I was selling. I had to train her up a little at the start of the weekend, but she picked up on everything really fast, and it was so nice. I've had helpers at conventions before, obviously, but a lot of the time my excessive amount of inventory made things confusing for folks, and if they aren't familiar with the fandoms I'm selling, it can make things difficult, and I feel less confident leaving them alone at my booth. But I've been trying really hard to make the selling experience easier for not only me, but also my helpers, so it'd be a little easier for me to step away from the table and not feel super guilty. Highly recommend it, it's good for the soul. The one thing that threw a little snag into my packing plans was books. Books are heavy, and I now have 2 of them. My How to Webcomic books and my new Cast-Off Volume 1 books. This was the first time bringing the Cast-Off books to a con, and it was going to be the largest con I've ever done, so I had no idea how many copies to bring. I opted to ship a box with books ahead to a friend and see how many I could fit into my suitcase after the fact. In the end, I brought about 15 How to Webcomic books and 35-ish Cast-Off books, which felt like overkill while I was packing, but I wanted to be safe. As for how that turned out, well, let's see. Day 0, aka Thursday. I woke up, packed everything into the car, picked up my helper, and zoomed over to the airport. The flight was pretty uneventful, but I did just want to point out how stupid cheap flights to Chicago are. Tickets for both me and my helper were just over 400 total, which is wild considering I did Holiday Matsuri a few years ago, and one plane ticket cost more than $500. Orlando, I hate you. Chicago, you're my new best friend. We touched down in the Midwest and snagged an Uber to the convention center, grabbed our badges, and headed up to my spot to set up the table. The setup went pretty smoothly, and afterwards we walked over to our hotel, got checked in, took a little rest, and then went out in search of dinner. Erin's boss apparently lived in Chicago and gave us a couple recommendations for food places to check out, and she was adamant that one of the places we needed to go was a hallmark of Chicago cuisine, Portillo's. Okay, side note here. I know it's supposed to be pronounced Portillo's, but my southern ass is so used to seeing something with two L's next to each other and reading it like a Y because that's how it is in Spanish. So I was definitely calling it Portillo's all weekend. Don't look at me like that. Anyway, we took an Uber to the closest Portillo's and grabbed our dinner. I got a Chicago-style hot dog and had fun recording dumb voiceover in my B-roll footage. Hot dog. We were also told that the chocolate cake at Portillo's was, and I quote, the best chocolate cake on the planet. So Erin got a slice and I got my beloved cake shake. So imagine a slice of the best chocolate cake you've ever had. You take that, shove it into a blender with some ice cream, and turn it into a milkshake. That's basically what this thing is. The Portillo's cake shake was divine, and even as I'm writing this, I wish I was drinking one. If I lived in Chicago, this would definitely turn into an addiction for me. I cherished every single sip of this honestly kinda too big drink. And quick little anecdote. While we were placing our orders at the little kiosk, I opted to get a cake shake and a soda, assuming the soda would be in a bottle and I could save it for later, but nope, it was a fountain drink. I got a milkshake and a fountain drink, and then didn't want to waste either of them, so when we left the restaurant to go grab snacks at a store nearby, I was carrying around 2 half-empty drink cups, and Erin kept making fun of me. They call me Starlet 2 Beverages, on account of my... well, I shan't say. Anyway, 2 beverages and several snacks in tow, we headed back to the hotel and crashed for the night, but not before laughing over our hotel view of the arena where a Critical Role live show is happening. Okay, so we walk into the hotel room and we're like, wow, look at this beautiful, pretty skyline. What the Why is it so big? That arena's full of nerds.
And Matt Mercer.
I'm probably. And then it was time for day 1. We woke up bright and early, grabbed some lunch at a nearby little food mart, and headed over to the con to finish setup. Just after opening, my helper skedaddled to watch the Lord of the Rings cast panel, and I was also visited by several friendos! One of the reasons I was excited for this convention was the fact that several pals and moderators from the Cast Off Discord were going to be attending, and they all stopped by on Friday morning to say hi. 2 of them even cosplayed from the comic, and this also happened. Wow, what a super normal day at C2E2! I sure hope— No! My son! My son, come back! Oh yeah, little fun fact is that I brought Vector plushie to this con. I've decided I want to be one of those people who takes pictures of a plushie of their OC in different places instead of selfies. So you're gonna see many pics of the boy throughout this video. What you will also see throughout this video is some little autobio comics I did over the weekend. A fun fact, I got started doing comics in middle school because I used to love making little comic strips about funny happenings among my friends. I've known Erin long enough that she actually remembers back in the day when I used to do this all the time, and it brought back so many good memories. I ended up doing a lot of these little comics while between customers at the booth. It was a lot of fun. What wasn't fun is the fact that I severely underestimated how many stickers I should bring to this show. I just recently made a lot of my acrylic pin designs into stickers, and this was the first con I had ever brought them to. I stupidly, naively, thought that bringing 15 of each sticker would be enough for a full weekend at a con with 100k attendees, and nope, not even close. I sold out of several sticker designs by the end of the first day and spent the rest of the weekend banging my head against the metaphorical wall over how many more sales I could have made if I had just brought more inventory. Oh well, lesson learned, I guess. Now, I came to this convention to sell things, but I also had a personal little side quest, which was buying as many stickers and sticker sheets as humanly possible. See, over the last half year or so, I've gotten really into journaling. I fell down the Hobonichi rabbit hole last year and now keep a daily journal that I fill every evening as my cool down activity before bed. It's been extremely good for my easily frazzled and emotional little brain, and as an artsy person, I really like to decorate my journal pages with stickers and washi tapes and stuff. So I went into C2E2 with my heart set on buying so many stickers, and yeah, I definitely managed that. Here's the one picture I took of my haul, and this isn't even all of it. I bought more later on in the show. There's a joke between artists at conventions that we're all just passing the same $20 bill around and buying things from each other, and I definitely felt that way after this con. But hey, I'm supporting my fellow artists, and I got some new planner decorations out of the deal, so it's all good. I love my new sticker haul, yay! Lastly, that evening after the con closed up, me, Aaron, and the server pals went to a pizza place down the road to tick off another item on our food checklist. You go to Chicago, you gotta get the deep dish pizza, right? Additionally, the restaurant had paper on the tables, and our party full of 6 grown-ass adults definitely asked for crayons so we could doodle our blorbos at the pizza place. A fun evening overall. Onward to Day 2! While Day 1 was a big day for sales, things definitely started slowing down a little on Day 2, but slow in this case is relative. While on Friday we rarely went 5 minutes without making a sale, Day 2 sometimes had stretches of 10 to 15 minutes between sales. Aaron and I bounced around a bit on why this could be. People could be at panels, or maybe the crowds were so thick people were avoiding the exhibit hall. She and I both walked around a decent amount on this day, and the crowds were not fun to navigate, so this almost definitely impacted things. Despite that though, sales weren't bad by any means. We ran out of How to Webcomic books midway through Saturday, another thing I should have brought more of, but I don't know where I would have shoved them in my luggage anyway. And we're consistently selling my keychains and stickers. But the time between sales let my mind wander a bit, and I started thinking about a new project and... Okay, well, we'll come back to that later. Let's finish talking about the con first. Overall, Day 2 went pretty smoothly. A busy day helped by the fact that I was able to leave my table and wander for a while when I got too antsy from sitting in one place for hours. I wandered the halls, bought more stickers, and even a few new sets of dice for my stash, and after the con ended for the day, we finished things off by ordering more Portillo's delivery and watching whatever was on the hotel TV, which, in this instance, was Jurassic Park 2. Side note, I've never seen Jurassic Park 2, but the first one is one of my favorite movies, and I adore a lot of Steven Spielberg's movies. I'd heard that Jurassic Park 2 wasn't great, but now that I've actually seen it... Steven, what happened? What the heck happened here, buddy? Why does this entire movie seem like it was ADR'd? Why is the pacing so weird and bad? Why is it written like that? Anyway, being salty about a dinosaur movie aside, we rested up and the next morning it was time for the final day. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm usually pretty good about taking notes during conventions for these videos, but I didn't write down hardly anything for Sunday. I think it was just a combo of nothing super exciting happening, plus the fact that both Aaron and I were just kinda not all there mentally by the time Day 3 rolled around. Conventions can be pretty exhausting, and by this point we'd done 2 9-hour days in a row at a busy convention. We were pretty wiped. Despite that though, still a good day. By the end of Sunday I had sold all but 2 of the cast-off books I brought, which is absolutely wild to me. I assumed I was gonna end up bringing way too many and I'd have to drag a bunch of extra books home and I'd feel all silly about it, but the Midwest loves their graphic novels apparently, and seeing the books fly off the shelf was a really heartening feeling. I had several people who bought the book earlier in the weekend come by on Sunday to tell me they read the whole thing and loved it, and man, I've talked about this in conventions videos before, but there's such a difference between reading people's comments online and actually getting to meet the people who enjoy your work. Getting to talk face to face with people who have read your stories, who say that your work has impacted them, seeing the real human people that tell you your work has added even a little bit of joy to their lives is, honestly, at this point, it's the biggest reason why I'm still doing conventions. Over the past few years, I've started deprioritizing cons, since preparing for and traveling to them can be exhausting and expensive, but the thing that keeps me excited is knowing I'll be able to meet new people and socialize in person with the folks who enjoy my work. It's become my favorite part of in-person events, so if y'all have ever come up to say hi at a con, just know that even the shortest interactions really brighten my day and make all the stress of preparing for events like this worth it. So, thank you. Thank you to everyone who came out to see me in Chicago. Thank you to anyone who has ever come to say hi at a con in the past, and anyone who ever visits my booth in the future. Getting to talk to y'all is a joy, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And if you're worried about being awkward, don't worry, I'm awkward too. We can be awkward together, it's fine. Anyway, after the con closed up for the day, we packed everything up, got dinner at a restaurant nearby, and spent the rest of the evening hanging out at mine and Aaron's hotel room, goofing off and chatting. It was nice to get to spend some chill time to relax after a long weekend, but before too long, it was time to head to bed. On our last day in Chicago, our flight home wasn't until later in the afternoon, so we got to spend some time in the morning doing a little bit of the touristy stuff. We couldn't miss the opportunity to see the Bean, so Aaron and I hung out and took some pictures and enjoyed the beautiful weather for a little while. We didn't really do too much venturing into actual downtown Chicago, but the parts we did see were super pretty. And if we get to come back to C2E2 next year, I'd like to add an extra day to the trip so we can do some more stuff around town. After seeing the Bean, we met up with a few folks and went on a little walk, ending up at the edge of Lake Michigan where we just got to sit and stare at the water for a while. We also made a duck friend, and we're all very sad we didn't have any food to give him. Eventually he waddled away, and we headed back to our hotel to grab our things before grabbing an Uber to the airport and heading home. And that was the weekend! But before we wrap up, we gotta go on a little bit of a tangent. Stay with me and let me yap for a minute. Because memories weren't the only thing I brought home with me from this con. While I was in Chicago, something else was bubbling up behind the scenes. So, I mentioned at the start of this video that I was really hoping this weekend would help recharge my creative batteries. And while I'd say I didn't get quite up to a full charge, I'd say I managed about 85% of the way there, and 85% is way better than the roughly 20% creative battery life I was running on at the start of the weekend. I've been talking in my live streams lately about how I've been trying to branch out and try other storytelling mediums, because as much as I love comics, they take a lot of time and effort, and I think trying to do more than one comic at a time might actually kill me. So I've been dipping my toes into writing prose. I've done a handful of short stories already, just trying to get used to weaving words in a satisfying way. Link to those in the description, by the way. But my end goal is to write novels. I think it'd be a fun way to do more storytelling that's less time-consuming than making comics, and I have all these characters I love so much who only exist in my head or in the D&D campaigns I play them in. So what if I took those ideas and combined them? I've been itching to write a story about my D&D characters for a while, and have even been working in the background to develop a new setting I could use as a vessel and shared universe for all these stories to take place in. And I'd been waffling over what character story I wanted to focus on first. At first, I was leaning towards Verity. She's my bibbiest bibby girl, and I love her and her storyline so damn much. But I kept getting caught up in the mental red tape of how exactly I'd adapt her story into a novel. Plus, her storyline is pretty complicated, and I was kinda scared to use it as my first attempt at writing a longer story. There's advice I hear around a lot that I also give folks wanting to make webcomics. Your first attempt at a new medium, comic, book, animation, whatever, is probably gonna be bad. So it's best to do something low stakes as your first try. A practice story, if you will. And once you get the practice story out into the world, then you can take what you've learned and apply it to future works. I started bouncing around ideas for what I could do as a practice novel. Maybe I could do some kind of prequel or side story, still focused on Verity, but with lower stakes. But no matter what I came up with, nothing was sticking. I was in the midst of struggling with ideas when C2E2 rolled around. And naturally, when you're stuck behind a table with someone for hours at a time, you start yapping about anything and everything. So I started talking to Aaron about the stories I was brainstorming and the struggles I was having, and just being able to bounce things around with someone who loves stories just as much as I do was so inspiring and fun, and getting my ideas out to someone who had never heard them before was really helpful in organizing my own thoughts. Which is when I started thinking, what if the practice novel wasn't about Verity? What if I used some of my other characters, shook the D&D off them, and shoved them together and made them be besties? What would happen then? Short answer, everything. Everything happened. Basically, I've got an idea for a novel now, and while I'm still working on the rough outline, stuff is really coming together fast. The story is mainly going to be focused on Lapis, my little amnesiac bard with stage fright, along with Zephyr as the secondary protagonist, with Laz and Felix in supporting roles. Oh, official Larry name drop if you hadn't heard. Their name is Laz. Say hi. I don't know when or how I'll be sharing actual written chapters of the story, if I'm going to be doing it serialized or just posting the whole thing when it's done or what, but things are happening and it's very exciting. Also, at this point I want to take a minute to shout out a little website y'all may have heard me talk about in the past, Unveil. They sponsored a video of mine around this time last year, and I've actually been using it in earnest for the past few months. It's been really helpful for keeping all my OC stuff organized, and when I started experimenting with short stories to practice for eventual novels, I ended up posting them all on Unveil. I've really enjoyed how the site not only lets you make listings for each character to keep information and pictures of them organized, you can also organize them into worlds. Given that the stories I'm going to be working on involve taking a bunch of disparate characters and mashing them together into the same plotline, the worlds feature is super handy. They're basically like folders you can use to organize characters and other works like writing and artwork and keep it all organized. Which is exactly what I did for my new novel in progress. I'll probably be adding more to this section as things develop, but right now we're still in the concepting phase, so just keep your eyes on it for now. I've also started doing art trades with some of my artist friends recently, and being able to just throw them a link to my Unveil instead of barraging them with a billion JPEGs for reference is super handy. You can sign up for the website for free with the link in my description, and thanks so much to Unveil for sponsoring this video. Anyway, all that is to say, your girl's working on a novel. I'll try to keep you folks updated, but we'll see how it goes. Stay tuned. Also, in case anyone is worried, this isn't going to negatively affect cast off or anything. Still trucking on that, just branching out and toying around with some other stuff in the background. We have fun here. And with that little tangent out of the way, let's close out the videos with the nitty-gritty and talk about numbers. So, C2E2, how'd we do? Before we get into this, a couple disclaimers. As always, I share numbers here for transparency, but I do round my numbers a little bit just to make the math cleaner. I also don't include the cost of making my merch into my convention fees because I don't buy merch exclusively for cons, and calculating all that would be really annoying. Lastly, these numbers don't include sales tax. My payment processor doesn't include that amount in my sales report, so just assume sales tax has already been taken out in all of these numbers. With that said, let's get into it. My raw sales over the weekend, including both cash and card transactions plus tips, amounted to $3,600 on Friday, $3,200 on Saturday, and $2,250 on Sunday for a grand total of $9,050 in total sales for the weekend. This is the best con I've ever done in terms of raw sales. My goal is to one day hit 10K in sales over a single weekend, and while I haven't hit that yet, this was definitely the closest I've ever gotten by a wide margin, and that feels really cool. But let's talk about that a little bit. I'll be honest, I seriously lucked out at this con. I had a good location that was in one of the rows closest to the entrance of the artist alley. If I had been further back, my sales probably would have suffered quite a bit. I also brought a lot of goods that do really well at Comic-Con specific shows. My works these days focus heavily on TTRPG and D&D stuff, which is really popular with Comic-Con crowds, and the cast of Critical Role and several folks from Baldur's Gate 3 being in attendance was also a huge sales booster. I probably could have done more sales if I had brought more inventory for my more popular sticker designs, as well as my How to Webcomic books. Lessons learned for next time. But, of course, I didn't get to actually take all that money home with me because conventions also mean expenses. So how much did I have to spend on this trip? Well, the table was on the pricey side, $480 for the 3 days of the con. Ouch. And then flights for both me and my helper were about $450 total. We also needed a hotel for 4 nights, which amounted to about $1,100. We spent about $100 on ride shares to get around for the weekend, and about $200 for food. The cast cost was negligible because I live much closer to the airport now, and my family was able to watch my cats for me, but parking at the airport for the weekend still ended up being around $60. Add all that together, and my expenses for the weekend totaled $2,390. Which took a pretty big chunk out of my profits, but that still meant I was able to break even on the first day, which is always huge for events like this. So, if we take our raw sales number and subtract all our expenses from it, at C2E2 2025, I made a grand total of $6,660. Oh my god, it's the Satan number! So, while I did really well at this show, it's not the most profitable one I've ever done. The sales were good, but the price of the table and getting there put a pretty big dent into my profits. But I learned a ton, had a lot of fun, and came home with a few months worth of mortgage payments to show for it, and I'm gonna call that a win. Okay, and last thing before we go, it's time for Star's Webcomic Corner, the part of the video where I talk about my favorite webcomics, boost my fellow creators, and give you guys something new and fun to read. So, let's get into it. When Sawyer Ellis is hired for a job at the House of LOWTHER, she thinks she knows what to expect. cleaning up the corridors, but keeping a strict schedule to maintain separation from the residents. However, not long into her stay, she stumbles upon the truth. The house isn't a simple rehabilitation facility for humans. Rather, it's a home for cryptids, a peaceful sanctuary where magical creatures can live in peace. Creatures such as the Chupacabra, Bigfoot, Mothman, a vampire with trouble transforming, and a werewolf who can't transform at all. Her job is to clean, nothing else. Yet Sawyer finds herself drawn to learning more about the residents and the workings of the house. But the longer she works there and the more she finds out, the more the facility starts to seem more like a prison. Is this really a sanctuary for the unusual, or is it something entirely darker? And how can one cog change the course of an entire dangerous machine? The House of LOWTHER is a comic I picked up recently after meeting the artist at C2E2. I was familiar with their work from their previous webcomic Plume, which I picked up a copy of at the con, and then discovered this one when I went looking for their newer works. I wasn't sure what to expect going into this one, but when I tell you I was hooked from the very first chapter, I mean it. I chewed through the entire archive in a single sitting and was devastated when I got caught up. The artwork is fantastic, and the artist has an amazing sense for subtle character acting and facial expressions. The characters are all very distinct in both their visual designs and personalities, and it's so easy to find yourself rooting for them. I am so excited to see where the story goes, and I highly encourage y'all to come along. If you'd like to check out the comic, you can read the entire story for free on Webtoon, and I'll have a link in the description, so go check it out. And that's gonna be all for this one. Thanks so much for watching, gang! The next con I'll be attending is coming up fast. I'll be at MomoCon in Atlanta, Georgia at the end of May, so if you'll be attending, make sure to swing by and say hi. Reminder that you can grab the art from this video on my online store, and if you haven't, be sure to check out my webcomic Cast-Off. Links for both will be down in the description. Thanks as always to my lovely Patreon supporters for helping to keep this channel afloat, and a special thank you to my video shout-out tier patrons. Jared, Holly, Mr. Donmatsu, Leaf, Astronaut Ruby, Alyssa Herzog, Felix Frenzy, and Neon Valkyrie. I've actually started posting my sketchbook pages to Patreon for all tier levels, so if y'all want to see some development sketches for the new novel in progress and support my creative endeavors, the Patreon is the place to be. Link is down below. But that's all from me for the day. Fare thee well, friends, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!